there has never been a more important time to move in a vegan direction. Whether you're ready to start, restart, or re-energize your vegan or plant-based practice, this podcast is for you. I'm Michele Olander, life coach, vegan, ADHD matriarch, travel lover, and smoothie loather. And I know that it's the details that get in the way of your vegan journey. But I like to believe that the obstacle is always the way. So every week we meet here where I translate the tools of life coaching and Stoic philosophy. I bring you actionable tips, some laughs, interesting guests, and vegan ideas for everyone at any age. All to help you veg your best. Episode 287, Stronger at Any Age, the No BS Vegan with Coach Karina Inkster. Hey kids, it's Michele. Are you starting to smell spring yet? Did anything melt? It's March, and we have a great guest to rev us up as we get ready for a new upcoming season, Karina Inkster. And you're going to hear a lot of very smart, very practical information from Karina, Coach K, as she's called. She's ridiculously well-informed, and she has one of those resource-filled websites I am so jealous of, where you click one thing and suddenly it's 45 minutes later and you've learned how to survive holidays, eat out with non-vegans, and strength train without living at the squat rack. And while you're listening, I want to play a little game with you. While Coach K is talking, see if you can predict the little change I put into place immediately after I got off the call with Karina. I wonder if you can do it. We also get into the perennial topic of protein in a way that's refreshingly sane, no bro science, no panic. And Karina shares her simple health hierarchy pyramid. And actually, that also kind of changed my month immediately. Maybe it'll change yours. Okay, ready? Let's get into it, and I'll catch you on the other side. Karina Inkster from the No BS Vegan podcast. Welcome to Veg Your Best.
Thank you so much, Michele, for having me here. Happy to speak with you.
I'm really looking forward to our conversation. You have been podcasting a really long time. I mean, as podcasts go, 2018, I believe. So you've got quite a back catalog, and you are more than a podcaster. As I've just mentioned to my listeners, you've got a lot to talk about. And I recently, you bubbled up in my algorithm because you were talking about your TED Talks. So I'm going to want to hear all about it. But first of all, tell me about your website, which is nobsvegan.com.
Yep. So the podcast is at karinainkster.com. It does have another URL that will take you there. It's basically the entire hub of what we do, including the podcast, is at karinainkster.com.
karinainkster.com. And that is an incredible website. Everybody should go to that, because if you have any questions about anything, I think you solved it. I think you've solved it on your website, Karina.
Well, I'm glad you think so. We do have a lot of resources, and a main way that we connect with our community is through articles and a protein calculator we have. And it's kind of like education, value forward type of thing. So yeah, there's a lot of guides for new vegans, how to eat at restaurants, how to survive your first holiday, how to live in a household that's not vegan. And then there's also specific things about strength training.
Yeah, you have so much in there. And that protein calculator, that it was a laugh in the family because I used it and I'm looking at it going, holy cow, not 200 grams of protein. That is a bit more than I'm expecting. But of course, I was in kilograms. I was not in pounds.
Oh, yeah, that'll make the difference. I was like, wait a sec, what's going on here?
No, I'm not that active. I'm not that active, Karina. I put moderate.
Yeah, that's fair.
So everybody use that calculator, because I think it's a great thing. There's so much talk about protein right now. And Karina, I'm going to ask you, let's back up a little bit. And how did you get this work?
This is a good question. So let's back up to when I was 11, when I
Mm.
went vegetarian for ethical reasons. It took me 5 years to realize that the meat, egg, and dairy industries are all one and the same. They're connected. They are morally indistinguishable from each other. But I mean, this is not an excuse, but back then, we're talking about the 90s. No social media. I didn't have internet access at the time. I think I got internet access for the first time when I was 15. So it's a little hard to, you know, figure out exactly what was going on. Anyway, so it took 5 years. At the age of 16, I went vegan,
Mm.
and it just kind of hung out in the background for a long time. I mean, now I'm turning 40 this year, so it's been a long time. But veganism didn't become part of my official career until more recently in that history. So I was in grad school doing my master's, possibly considering going into the academic route, like doing a PhD, becoming a researcher. But I realized I missed working with people face to face. This was very research based. It's a social science gerontology degree. And so I kind of did a 180 and became a fitness coach in the same month that I defended my thesis. So I did my like practical exam for becoming a trainer at the same time as defending my thesis. Would not recommend, by the way. Anyway, my friends were all not surprised at all. I thought it was like this big, life change. Okay, so I'm not doing academics. I'm going into working with people one on one with their fitness. My friends were like, well, duh, because I was into fitness myself at that point. But it wasn't vegan based until this is like 2011. It wasn't vegan forward until I would say 2017 when I decided to go completely online. So from 2011 to 2017, I'm working with people in gyms, one on one, all sorts of folks, mostly people looking to build muscle, build bone density so they can kick ass when they're 100. Now, when I went online, in order to move from Vancouver to Powell River and, not be location dependent, I realized I needed a niche. You can't just be any random coach online. You have to be
Mm.
very specific about the people you work with. Vegan was the obvious choice back in 2017. It's a huge part of who I am, big part of my identity, great piece to connect with others on. And it's related to the work I'm doing. A lot of people are confused. They're like, well, what's a vegan fitness coach? Don't you just talk about strength training? Like, what does vegan have to do with it? But we also talk about nutrition. You have to fuel your workouts, you got to recover from your workouts. So it's inherent.
Mm.
And so now my team and I get to work with people kind of in our world, right? Most of us are ethical vegans. We're here for a similar purpose. We don't have to worry about people saying, oh, did you have your whey protein shake today? How many egg whites did you have this morning? Like all of that is off the table. And it's a fantastic community that we've built.
Well, Karina, you also didn't just go vegan. You also have some obstacles, I think, are fair to say about
Hmm.
how you can eat and work out. Can you tell us about those? Because I think a lot of us, all our excuses are just going to like just float away when we hear some of your obstacles.
Yes, obstacles is what I would call it as well. So I think that is fair. I will say that in 23 years of being vegan, I've met maybe two people who, for various legitimate medical reasons, couldn't go vegan. So I know it's used a lot in the non-vegan world of like, well, I know someone who has blah, blah, blah and couldn't go vegan. Like, okay, that exists. In my case, yes, I have obstacles, which I will tell you about, but it still means I can be a healthy vegan. It just takes a little more effort.
Mm, of
So there's nuance, right?
course, always.
Okay, so my thing is I am deathly allergic to all tree nuts and raw fruit, including avocados,
Mm.
which you can imagine is a little challenging when you're plant-based. I was on a flight recently from Ottawa to Vancouver, heading back from a trip, and someone announced there's someone on the plane who has a severe peanut allergy. So make sure you don't open any packages that contain peanut ingredients. Well, guess what percentage of the snacks I brought contained peanuts? Because it's the only nut I can have. 100%.
Because they're ground nuts.
They're legumes, technically.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So all my snacks contained peanuts, like protein bars and whatever else. So I learned at that point I need to bring things like vegan jerky and maybe some protein powder. Anyway, so for me, I can't have any sort of tree nut in any form, but I can have fruit that's been cooked because it denatures the protein that I'm allergic to. So there's that part. Then there's also what's called food dependent exercise induced anaphylaxis, which is a mouthful. Um, Basically, it means that I have food sensitivities or like low grade allergies where if I eat the food, nothing happens. But if I eat the food and then go work out really hard, it can become full blown anaphylaxis. The challenge here is you have no idea what that food is because it's anything you've eaten over the last 8 hours. And it doesn't cause any issues by itself. So I've had to rejig my training schedule. I do strength train later in the day because I think I've only had one or two reactions doing that. I find the heart rate goes up and down, right? You do a set, you take a break, you do another set, but I don't do cardio, especially intensive stuff later in the day. So all my swimming training, jump rope, all that stuff is in the morning after just having had oatmeal, which I know is a safe food. So part of it is like the food piece, and part of it is the scheduling exercise piece.
So you have learned workarounds. You
Yeah.
have created, like, I always try not to say the D word, the discipline word, because I feel like people beat themselves up too much when they're having trouble. We all have trouble with any new
Mm-hmm.
undertaking, and we
Mm-hmm.
shouldn't be telling ourselves it's because we're undisciplined, because that sounds like a permanent situation for ourselves. There's no discipline there. That's like life and death for you.
Oh, yeah. I have an EpiPen in my bag at all times.
Yeah.
Yeah, literally.
Yeah. Yeah. So so your training schedule then begins after a little bit of oatmeal, typically?
Yeah, I'll have some oatmeal in the morning. Like today was a swim day, so I have my oatmeal and then I head to the pool. I do my swim. In the summer months, I run an open water swim club with a friend. So we're out on the lakes, in the ocean. It's just beautiful in the Pacific Northwest here, but it does mean that our outdoor swim season is pretty short. It's like June to October. And then later in the day, 4 to 5 days a week, I'll strength train. And that hasn't, like I said, it's created like one or two kind of minor reactions in probably 20 years. So I'm
Wow.
okay with that. Risk
Wow.
relatively low.
So what now? So that's not everybody's situation for
No.
sure. So what are the typical challenges or obstacles your new clients, even your old clients, what do they present with as their challenges and obstacles? And do you throw that in their face that you could die if you did it wrong?
You know what? I don't. I think most of our clients don't even know unless they've creeped our website into the like super depths of the about section like you have. So no, I don't. But I've actually had two clients with similar allergies, like
Hmm.
the fruit and the tree nut thing. They're related to seasonal pollen allergies. Mine are just kind of really off the charts. Some people just get like an itchy tongue for 10 minutes
My
and that's
daughter
it.
has that, an oral allergy syndrome
Exactly.
to certain stone fruits.
So it's basically that on steroids.
Hmm.
Exactly. So mostly challenges are around two things. One is consistency, and two is knowing what to do if they're new to strength training. It's like overwhelm, having gone through a whole bunch of free apps, trying a bunch of different programs, being overwhelmed with options, or just not knowing what's best and second guessing a lot. Like, am I actually being effective with my time in the gym? Am I doing the exercises that are going to get me results? It's kind of those type of questions. And the consistency piece isn't just about being consistent and doing the thing. We all know motivation and willpower and discipline in air quotes are finite resources. We don't
Yes.
have them all the time, and we ideally should be creating a routine that doesn't require motivation, discipline, or willpower. But the consistency piece is like someone goes on a work trip, someone's parent ends up in the hospital and they have to do caregiving. A lot of our clients are mid 50s to mid 60s. So if they have parents around, they're generally older. A lot of them have health concerns. So it's like how to maintain consistency when life goes sideways. Kind of the workarounds, what happens if I travel, what happens if I'm super busy. And so we work with each person individually to come up with a plan around that.
So I think this is true. I mean, so many people will say, yeah, but being vegan or working out, whatever the challenge is, that's the problem because every single thing that we try to do runs up against these exact same obstacles, right? The idea of being overwhelmed, not knowing which plan to do, overthinking it, thinking, yeah, but should I even start if I don't know the exact right plan to begin with? Or I can't do it every single day this month because I've got this going on, so might as well do nothing. So these are how we go vegan, how we get work out. It's how we do everything, right?
Totally. It is an added layer, though, because we as vegans live in a non-vegan society. We also live in a non-active by default society. So
Mm.
people who are active, people who are vegan are already going against the grain of what our society is built to produce, basically, which is mostly sedentary office workers. So, yeah, I mean, it's an added layer of challenge for sure. But I feel like if you can be vegan in a society that is not built for that viewpoint, even never mind that diet, you can probably figure out how to be consistent with strength training.
Yeah, I feel like if you can be vegan in a non-vegan world, you can do anything. It's just
Pretty
like such a
much.
such such a subversive act, right?
Yeah,
To choose to do what other people think is important.
exactly.
Yeah. Or what other people think is impossible. Excuse me.
Yes, 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 yes.
Yeah. So, all right. So your master's is, and I'm, because I resemble this remark, your master's is in gerontology. I'm turning 67 in a little while. And what did you learn in gerontology, in your study of gerontology, that has helped you support your clients who you say are typically 50s, 60s?
hmm The degree itself is a social science. So we're looking
Mhm.
at population level data. We're looking at health and aging was my specialty. The other option is to do environment and aging. An environment is more like the built environment, right? So accessibility, things like that. So health and aging was on a very broad scale, looking at things like blue zones, looking at different factors that influence how active someone is later in life, looking at barriers. So it did feel like I learned a lot of useful skills academically, doing lit reviews, doing
Mm.
my own study for my thesis, looking at different culture and barriers to being consistent with exercise and how that differed across cultures. So it's very kind of high level, looking down from 10,000 feet kind of thing. And it wasn't a lot of what resources are required to get an individual the support that they need, if that makes sense.
Hmm.
So that's kind of why I did that 180, or what I felt like was a 180, going into working one on one with folks. Again, many of whom were older, because you're looking at each person. Of course, they're part of a larger system that requires research and support and programming and stuff. But it just felt a little more me to be working with people individually and looking at, like me as an example with my weird allergies. What are this person's motivations and how can I help that one person?
Hmm. So this is always so interesting. I think in medicine, it's the same thing. You have 300 million people, or you have a billion people that you're looking at grand numbers with, and what constitutes public health in whatever context you're operating in, and then you have the individual who walks
hmm
in the
hmm
door. And it's so interesting that you were immediately, you noticed early on in your career that you were drawn. You wanted that one person walking in the door to use
hmm
your intellect with.
Yeah, I think it's It's just something that I've been drawn to generally. Like, if I had to choose, I would classify myself as an introvert. I think it's moved around a little bit, being in the kind of world where you're talking to people you don't know regularly. I think it's pushed me out of that a little bit. But I still prefer working with people individually and having a long-term relationship with someone versus having a giant group of 200 people you're addressing.
Mm. Hmm. Well, speaking of addressing a large group of people,
Oh, right.
your TEDx talk, was that in Canada?
Yeah.
Near you in yeah.
Yeah.
Your TEDx talk is what well, I want to hear all about it. I want to hear what made you think about it and what you learned from it, because it's one thing. Basically, you talked about you had to market yourself as when you went online in terms of your work. I'm a
Hmm.
vegan. I'm a life coach, but I market to vegans because some people either want to be vegan or they are vegan and they don't want to have what they are concerned with in terms of being vegan marginalized or or not understood. So
Hmm.
we both have this have that same online presence, but we are both usually talking to people who know that about us already.
Yes. Well, it was an interesting opportunity. So, like you said, we both are used to preaching to the choir, as it were, right? So I'm used to speaking at veg fests or similar events where everyone's already plant-based or at least plant curious. They're somewhere on the spectrum.
Yeah.
This is an audience of 1,000 people who, by the way, they know who the speakers are. They don't know what the topic is until they show up that day. So, how it started was a former business coach of mine messaged me. She used to be a client as well back in the day. Hadn't heard from her for a long time. She messaged me and she said, "Hey, have you ever considered giving a TEDx talk?" And I was like, "No, why?" And she said, "Oh, well, I'm on the curation team for TEDx Surrey, which is one of the largest TEDx events, if not the largest in Canada. And she invited me to apply, like just, put in an application, see what happens. She doesn't have say as to like whether I'm going to get in or not, but she's on the team looking for people for this event. So I'm like, okay, sure, why not? Put in an application, which required a full speech script, by the way. So I had to write the talk as part of the application. And then I got invited to an audition and they ended up picking me. And I thought, well, this is interesting because I do have mixed feelings about the TEDx ecosystem. Full disclosure, I do think it's very performative. Not sure how inclusive it is. It's platforming people who already have platforms usually. It's just not my preferred method as a consumer of information to learn about something. If I wanted to learn about something, a TEDx talk is not where I would go because I know that they're very general. I want to use the term lowest common denominator, but that sounds kind of bad. Anyway, so I do have those mixed feelings. However, it's a fantastic opportunity to speak to a group of 1,000 people in person who I would never have the opportunity to speak with otherwise. Plus, it's then going to be a video, which will come out in the next few months at some point, as a piece of online content to further veganism. Obviously, this is a message I care about. It's not my preferred delivery method, but I said, why not? You know what? I'm happy to do the work. I'm going to go all in. I'm going to play the game. I'm going to do the thing. And I learned a lot. I learned a lot about how the quote unquote general population thinks about veganism and how they either close or open to vegan messages depending on how they're presented. It was super interesting. So I learned a lot about public speaking in general. I learned a lot about speaking to non-vegan audiences. And I learned that there are people who connect with the TEDx methodology. Presumably the people who buy tickets are into this sort of event, you would think. And so I had really interesting conversations with people who were there. One person said, I'm not eating meat anymore. One person said, oh, I never made the connection between my dog and livestock before, but now I do. So clearly it's planting seeds. There were people on the TEDx team who stocked their fridge with walnut milk and hemp milk and aren't even vegan because of our interactions.
Mm.
There was someone who was a storytelling expert who was there to help us, with our script, whose story example at the very beginning of the TEDx journey was about buying steak at the farmer's market. A couple weeks later, he emails me, "Hey, what was that high protein vegan food you were talking about on Zoom? I want to check it out." So obviously it worked on some level, which I'm happy about. That was the whole point. So I basically saw it as an opportunity to further a message that I care about, even though the way that it was presented was not 100% my jam.
I really enjoyed that it's both, right? Both things are true. And it's so important that we go out there, I think, as vegans and just be seen as vegans doing the rest of life out there and making it work in front of other people, because I think that is our most powerful message, is just people actually seeing a human being actually. It sounds impossible to most people, right? It really does sound impossible to most people. And all the time I hear people say, of course I would love to not eat animals, but how would that even work? What would that even look like?
Exactly.
So when they see you, now they see what it looks like. And even if it doesn't fully drop the idea of that certain things could be tried, it's so beautiful. And I was really delighted to on your Instagram at Karina Inkster, right? At Karina Inkster. I saw some of your posts about that, and I was just really delighted. And I encourage anybody out there, whether it's your plant-based or your vegan journey, but do what's important to you out in public. I think especially so many of us that are socialized as women, maybe a little bit older, introverts, as you say, we kind of hide that light under a bushel.
Yeah, that's a good way of putting it.
Yeah. So some people were open. What did closed look like? Did you run into people and how did that, what did you get from realizing some people were closed to the concept?
So that's a good question. I didn't experience that on the day with the finished talk, probably for two reasons. One is that the talk was specifically written to avoid that. But two, the people who are closed wouldn't have come up to me and had a conversation, most likely. But in the process of doing coaching and script work, and I met with a TEDx coach every week for 2.5 months. It's a pretty intense process. You write the script, you work on it, you deliver it 5 times to the whole group and work on, refining things and delivery and all this. Anyway, so what I learned from that process, so my fellow speakers, there's 11 other speakers, and a huge group of coaches. Everyone's a volunteer, by the way, which I think is amazing. It's a nonprofit. These people are all doing this on their own time, which is pretty amazing. But one thing I learned is, first of all, everyone responds differently. So we can't just lump vegans and non-vegans into giant boxes and leave it at that, right? Some people do legitimately change their behaviors when they see slaughterhouse footage on a TV that an activist is holding on the corner of a street. Other people immediately shut off and think all vegans are insane. So, just the caveat there's a huge variety of reactions. However, the one theme that I noticed was you can shock people into turning completely off from your message. So you need to have the right type of emotional connection and just enough information that might make them think, oh, crap, I didn't know that, without going into the essentially the slaughterhouse footage equivalent of a talk, like all the horrible things that happen. Now they're completely shut off. It's trauma adjacent. They don't want to hear it. They think it's too extreme. They're starting to doubt that you're telling the truth, etc. So what I ended up doing was using myself as a proxy for the audience's journey. It doesn't work just standing there saying, you should go vegan for A, B, and C reasons. Doesn't work. I used myself. Well, I was 11 and I learned this and then I did this. Oh, now I'm 16 and I learned this new thing. I was shocked. Then I did this. Now I'm 20. Now I learned about health. Then I did this. It's all about me. but it's what I'm hoping the audience is going to experience during the talk. I'm learning about ethics, I'm learning about health, later the environment. So it basically just takes people along this journey of me starting at 11, going up until now I'm almost 40. And that seemed to work. You know, there's a kind of fun story about my pet hamster. People are like, that was so cute. How I connected, well, a hamster's not that different from the chicken I'm about to eat for dinner, you know? So it's all based on my own experience in the interest of getting the audience to feel something.
Yeah, I think that's always important for us to remember in terms of any communication. Anytime we're trying to teach, we have to find out where's the shared points of reference. My guest this week is a comedian, a British comedian, Athena Kublenu, and she was talking about how comedy only works about the topics that we have in common.
Right. Yes, of course.
You can add a little something to it, but you have to actually have something in common. Otherwise, it just doesn't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the commonality is not necessarily that people had a pet hamster and made the connection between the hamster and the chicken. The commonality is that we all were 11 at one point, and most of us had a pet of some kind.
Exactly. So there's some kind of point of reference that they can relate to, that they can feel in some way. So this, and so now this TEDx this talk will live evergreen on the World Wide Web somewhere.
Yep.
That's
It's not
marvelous.
out yet. You know, it's a
Okay.
huge process. There's rules about submitting it to the main TED organization.
Oh, I see.
They have to vet everything. They, at some point, will publish it on the TEDx channel. If it ends up being an editor's pick, which would be great, but there's a very small chance of that. But if it does, they have one a day. So it could be published like 11 months from now. We don't really know at this point, but it will be at some point online.
We can't lobby it. We can't send an email to the government.
That would be pretty sweet, actually.
Karina, so much about being vegan now seems to be being marketed a lot of foodstuffs, a lot of, I mean, everything's processed somewhere, somehow, I guess you could, depending how you decide to define it. But there's just so much candy and frozen dessert, and I find it discouraging as a vegan sometimes. Ethical or not, I would like people to be spending a little more time on trying to not just separate me as a consumer. I don't know. What's your reaction to all of that?
Do you mean because those items are made to resemble animal foods? Is that where that's coming from?
No, just because I feel like there's so much money spent in fun foods, like entertainment food.
Oh, I see.
That's not really particularly nutritious. It's not particularly ethical from a plastic, point of view.
Right.
It's, I don't know. I sometimes feel that we've gotten turned into a consumer group rather than an ethical choice.
Well, that's an interesting way of looking at it. It's kind of similar to what happens in the fitness industry, where technically we're all here to help people increase their health and their quality of life. But there's also money involved, which is why there's so much pseudoscience and BS and crazy marketing claims, because you're combining the fitness and the health piece with making money. Kind of the same in this case.
Yeah.
It would be dumb in 2026 for a major business to not have vegan options, just from a pure marketing revenue standpoint. So I guess that's one part of it is, yeah, by default, we're a market because we buy food and we vote with our food dollars. Food is something we have to buy. You have a choice whether you're going to work out or not. Food, you got to eat it. It's different. Nutrition and fitness are very different in that respect. Now, I'm not a whole food only vegan. I'm not whole food plant-based, no oil, no sugar, blah, blah, blah. I think it's unnecessary. I think it's actually unhealthy if you're trying to strength train and increase bone density. You're probably not getting enough protein. I know that's very stereotypical, and we can talk about that as well. So I have no problems with Beyond Burgers and vegan ice cream, etc. I eat a Beyond Burger once a week, at least. No issues with that. What I think is missing is context. Okay, so I eat a Beyond Burger every week. Fine. What does the rest of my diet look like? Is it more Beyond Burgers? Is it Twizzlers? Is it Oreos? No, it's mostly whole foods. Now, if someone were sitting around only eating the vegan ice cream and the Annie's mac and cheese and et cetera, okay, they're probably not in line with whatever health goals they might have.
Mm.
So I think also the vegan options that resemble animal products are great intermediate kind of accessories for people who want to be plant-based. The largest market of people who buy Beyond Burgers, for example, are not vegan. They just want to help, climate. It's basically like a climate action for a lot of people. So I don't know. I don't really see like big broccoli taking out Super Bowl ads or, I don't see ads for frozen vegetables, which is unfortunate because all the ads we see, all the social media things we see are for packaged products, even in the health environment. Protein powders, supplements, protein bars, et cetera, it's all marketing. And are some of those products legit? Of course. But should we exclusively eat those things if we want to live long and healthy and et cetera, et cetera? No.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's so good for people to have someone like you either in their ears through the podcast or in their corner as a trainer, because how do we implement some of these concerns when we are moving in a plant-based direction or moving in a vegan direction, or when we are vegan and now we're looking at your protein calculator and going, oh my gosh, am I even getting that number of grams? How many grams even am I? Like, how do you even know? That was something that occurred to me about a year and I always assumed, like many vegans, there's protein in everything I'm eating that's whole food, plant-based. And I kind of left it at that. And then my physician said, how many grams do you think you're eating? And I was like, So I spent like a few months just kind of doing it in a calculator. And I noticed it was probably more around 70 grams. And so I started shooting for 100. I don't worry about I don't worry about details, but I started shooting for more. And I'd love to know, what are some great ideas that people, now that they've used your calculator on your website, and now they're going, oh, how do I even know? And now what should I do?
So folks can actually go to a shortcut if they're listening and they want to type in the URL. They can go to veganproteincalc.com and it takes them to the right place. But anyway, I think there's a couple things happening here. One is a lot of the protein recommendations are way too high. They come out of the kind of bro science bodybuilding world. So I'm not saying you need to eat 300 grams of protein a day. You do not. So the calculator takes all of this into account, right? It takes into account how active you are and whether you're in a calorie deficit, which means you need a little extra protein to make sure you're not losing muscle mass. But it's not going to give you an insane number. I see so many people coming to me saying, how do I get 200 grams of protein on 1,800 calories a day? And I'm like, you don't, unless all you do is protein shakes. And how sustainable and healthy is that? Anyway, so the first piece is you might not actually need as much protein as you think, especially if the idea of protein requirements is coming out of bodybuilding bro science. So that's the first part. Second part is, yes, protein is important. And no, you're not automatically going to get enough just by eating vegan foods in whatever caloric quantity you need for the day. There's a lot of vegan folks, including big name doctors, who say you don't have to worry about protein on a vegan diet if you eat enough calories. That's just not true. It is not true. If you're older, if you're post-menopause, if you care about bone density, if you strength train, you need more protein than someone who is completely sedentary and younger, doesn't strength train, etc. So there's kind of two pieces. Like, you don't need an insane amount of protein, but it's super important. And the thing with protein is there's no RDA. There's no recommended daily allowance because it's different from person to person. Hence the calculator, which takes into account your body weight and your activity level, all that. So the first step is to figure out how much you need. I can't blanket statement that for people because it's going to be different. And the second step is, what is that going to look like in practice? Let's say you end up with a goal of 100 grams, which seems reasonable for someone who's relatively active, right? Kind of moderately, strength training, cardio, whatever. You also need to figure out how many calories you have to work with. If you're a large person who is super active, you have generally more fuel to work with than someone who's in a smaller body who works a desk job all day. So the way in which you get your protein will partly depend on how many calories you have to work with, because your protein goal doesn't change. Your protein goal might be 100 grams, but you only have 1,800 calories to do it in. Or your protein goal might be 100 grams and you have 2,200 calories to do it in, which is easier. So the protein density of foods becomes more or less important based on how much fuel you're taking in every day. But super generally, what I see a lot with clients who are coming to us for the first time is, oh, I eat a lot of beans, so I'm getting enough protein. Oh, I heard spinach and broccoli are high in protein. I eat those. It's not going to cut it. You need plant-based, protein-first sources, which means more protein than carbs or fats, protein-concentrated sources. Beans are great. I got nothing against legumes. I think they're amazing. But most of their calories come from carbohydrates, including fiber, which is very important. But something like seitan, which I make myself, something like fava bean tofu, where 91% of its calories come straight from protein, things like that, that are concentrated sources of protein, you can just add to what you're already doing. You don't have to center your whole diet around these things. But I often see people who need to add more concentrated sources of protein to what they're already doing. And I will also mention, technically it's correct that something like spinach is, quote, high in protein. Yes, actually, a large percentage of the calories in spinach come from protein. But to get 20 grams of protein from spinach, you have to eat 24 cups of spinach, which some people might be cool with, but I'm not.
Math.
You need to eat like a palm-sized piece or smaller of fava bean tofu to get 20 grams of protein. So yeah, okay, technically there's some truth to that, especially the whole food exclusive folks who are always going on about, well, every food has protein, just eat enough calories. Yeah, there's some truth to that, but you're not taking into account caloric density in this case.
Right. No, I think that I'm so glad that you went through that, because I think that was a very, very accessible explanation of what we need, the two parts of it that we need to keep in mind. That's super important. And now tell me, from your point of view, there is a lot of talk now that you need to be getting 30 of those grams first thing in the morning. Now, you have the way you eat based on your workout schedule and your food. How do you refer to it? The obstacles you have about your
food allergies, food obstacles, whatever. Yeah.
But do you think it makes a big difference for your clients if they try to get that 30 grams or 20 grams of it, or 1/5 of the goal of their protein first thing in the morning?
Honestly, the 24-hour period is what matters most. There's a lot of hype about getting the 30 grams right after your workout, or getting 30 grams first thing in the morning. And,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, in a way it can help to get 30 grams out of the way with your breakfast. But if that's not your thing, if you want to do oatmeal or something that isn't inherently super high in protein, and it's easy for you to get your protein goal later in the day, nothing wrong with that. So there's nothing magical about getting your protein first thing in the morning. Just for some folks, it makes their whole day of protein easier.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. I think the idea that now you've gotten that big, it's like getting your workout done in the morning.
Exactly.
You've got that that's done.
Yeah.
The big task. Now, so now we've talked about protein, which is always it's the joke for vegans, yet it's actually important because I do
Hmm.
think a lot of vegans could go a long time without having heard the distinctions that you've just made about the amount of protein we need and the calorie density of that protein. What fitness things should my listeners make sure that they just have an awareness of that's just as important?
Good question. So we use what we call the physique change and health hierarchy with our clients. It's four things in a pyramid. So the bottom, widest part of the pyramid is the most important, and the top point of the pyramid is still part of the picture, but it's not as important. So there's four things, and it applies to both physique change, which is essentially body composition, right? Gaining muscle, losing fat, or both. And it also applies to health. By the way, the reason we don't work with people who want to compete in physique competitions is because it's not health forward. It's a whole other thing. Anyway, the bottom foundation of this whole pyramid is nutrition. So we've talked about that protein, making sure you're getting the fuel you need, making sure you're eating mostly whole foods. I usually do an 80-20 split. 80% whole foods you've made yourself, 20% whatever you want. Keeps it completely sustainable. So that's the bottom. The next important step on this hierarchy or pyramid is strength training, which a lot of people think means hours in a gym, having no life, going and hanging out with the bros at the squat rack. But it doesn't have to look like that. If that's what you want to do, fine. But it can look like a resistance band workout for 15 minutes in your living room. It could look like going to the community center and using the cable machine for 10 minutes before you do your cardio. There's lots of different options, but strength training is non-negotiable, especially as we get older. And it's more important than cardio. I'll just say it right now. I'm not saying you shouldn't do cardio, but if you're going to choose one, make it strength training. 3 days a week, 20 to 30 minutes, full body, focusing on compound movements. So not like bicep curls and tricep extensions, but push-ups, rows, squats, deadlifts. The next step on the pyramid is recovery. Sleeping enough, doing your mobility moves if you need them, recovering after a workout in whatever method works for you. Some people sauna, some people ice bath, some people just make sure they get enough sleep that night. Managing stress as best as we can, meditating if that's your thing. It's all in that bucket of recovery. And the very top point, cherry on top, is cardio. It's still important. We still have to do it. It's great for our circulation. It's great for our lung capacity. For a lot of people, it's really good for mental health. I always tell people I don't meditate, but I swim. So it's very important for me as a mental health practice. But it's not going to make as much difference generally to your health as strength training.
So that's something I think is also counterintuitive for a lot of us. We think that that's the foundation is the cardio.
A lot of us have grown up in cardio world, especially as people born as females,
Yeah.
lots of step class, lots of aerobics, lots of trying to shrink ourselves, like physically and also psychologically. And so strength training is kind of the opposite. Yeah, it can affect body composition. Yeah, it can help with weight loss if that's someone's goal. But also, it means that we can live to 100 and be capable and carry our own groceries and do all the things we want to do.
There's so much, you were talking about to make money. So many people in fitness are selling all kinds of supplements and all kinds of things. And I think there's a place for all or most of it, but it's so boring. The foundations. I was talking to my doctor one time about this, and she says, people come in and they want rapamycin. And I'm like,
Oh,
you know
yeah,
what? We might want to start with you bringing down your BMI, you sleep in a little bit better, drinking a little more water,
exactly.
moving
But
a
it's
little more.
boring. The boring basics. Yeah, I've always heard if fitness coaches posted their actual workouts, they would have 2 followers, which are basically their parents. No one cares. It's boring. It's the same stuff every day. So what we see is sensationalized. It's entertainment. It's not what people actually did to get healthy or to get strong.
Yeah, yeah, it's boring, and it's like all the other foundational things, and then when you've got those things dialed in, that pyramid is just like, so let's wrap our concentration around your pyramid, and then we can start discussing with our doctors, what kinds of supplements and that sort of thing that we can add
Supplements
in.
aren't even on the pyramid because, okay, they can be part of the deal, but they're not the 4 basics.
Yeah. Yeah, such a great. So, Karina, I want to make sure that everybody follows your podcast. So that's the No BS Vegan. You have such a back catalog. Everybody, even if there's something in there, I don't like this, you'll find something in there that you love, that you will learn something so much about. At Karina Inkster on Instagram.
Yep.
And what on your website? I love the protein calculator. I think that's so much fun. Everybody should go and just see whether it's a number you expect.
Yeah,
I think that's such a great way to.
Is it more? Is it less? Only one way to find out.
Yeah, I think that's a fun thing. And what else on your website? I'd love them to all go to your website and see something. You've got workouts, you've got articles, you've got all kinds of stuff. What else should they look at on your website? First thing.
Well, that's a great question. There's actually one thing that relates directly to what we were talking about in the protein realm, which, okay, yeah, stereotypical vegan conversation, but it's really cool graphs that one of my clients made for this article. He's like, his whole business is data visualization. So when I was writing this article, I hired him to make the visuals for this article. So if you go to the articles section, the title is The Best Vegan Sources of Protein and Why Calorie Density and Protein Density Matter. And that's exactly what we were talking about when I mentioned 24 cups of spinach you would have to eat to get 20 grams of protein. So it's in the article section. It's just visualized. It shows you how many calories worth you would need to eat of each food to get 20 grams of protein. For example, nuts are often mentioned in the vegan world as protein foods. You would need to eat 642 calories worth of almonds to get 20 grams of protein. And you only need to eat 90 calories worth of fava bean tofu to get 20 grams of protein. So you can see a whole graph of different vegan foods.
That's great. And that's something that I think sticks with people when they can look at a visual like that. That's super. Karina, thank you so much. Karina Inkster, No BS Vegan Podcast, at Karina Inkster on Instagram and KarinaInkster.com. Did I get them all right?
You did, yes. Thank you so much, Michele. So great to chat with you.
It's great to see you. And I will be looking for, tell us if we can lobby for your TED Talk to get...
I wish, but no, I will share it on my site though when it's out officially.
That's marvelous. And we'll have all your links. Actually, you don't have to remember or do, our listeners, you don't have to do rewind to figure out. It'll all be in the show notes. And I'm delighted to have you with us. Thank you, Karina.
Thank you so much.
So, what did you think of Karina Inkster, Coach K? And did you predict the little tweak I made right after I interviewed her? If you said fava bean tofu, ding, 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 you win. Yeah, I put fava bean tofu on the grocery list for this week immediately after the interview ended. And my husband says we have had it a couple times before, but I truly don't remember. But either way, more protein per calorie, a little more variety beyond soy, and that sounded like a very smart staple to have on hand. Now, the other big takeaway for me is her health hierarchy pyramid. Nutrition as the base, the biggest part of our priority. Strength training, non-negotiable, especially as we get older. And for sure, I can easily talk myself out of strength training on any given day. And then up above nutrition, then strength training, recovery. Matters way more than we want to admit sometimes. And then cardio, the cherry on the top, not the foundation of Karina's health hierarchy pyramid. I'd love to know what you think about that pyramid. Which layer surprised you, or which layer do you tend to skip when life gets busy? Nutrition, strength training, recovery? Anyway, if you want Karina's resources, her hub, as she stated, is KarinaInkster.com. And you can find the protein calculator on her vegan resources page, which is super helpful. And definitely subscribe to her podcast, the No BS Vegan Podcast, which has actually been nominated for a 2026 Veggie Award by Veg News Magazine. So one more thing. I emailed Karina right after we wrapped. And okay, maybe I ordered the tofu first, but then I said to her, I cannot believe I forgot to ask you about playing the accordion and the didgeridoo. So yes, we have to have Karina back. Let me know, my Veg Your Bestie, if today's conversation with Coach Karina Inkster inspired you to make any small changes or a bit of a tweak this week. And let me know anyway. Comments, DM me, reply to the V-mail, email me. I don't care. I just always love hearing how you veg your best.
Veg Your Best podcast production, music, and editing by Charlie Weinshank. Thanks, Charlie. Before you go, it would mean so much to me and the Veg Your Best team if you would hit subscribe, leave us a 5-star review, or share with someone you think might be interested. Something about algorithms, it helps bump us up a little in the rankings, and that's the best way to help others find the podcast and for us to find our audience. So, until next week, make it easy and veg your best.